Last time we saw each other, we were building a payment gateway. And well, I have to be honest, we're still continuing on that right now. So hold on to your horses because now it's getting a bit more complicated. Where we landed is we have the payment gateway, right? We have something we can talk to, but it's not talking to Stripe yet to process a payment. And it's not really getting anything from our checkout just. So what we want to do here is the very, very first step that we want to go through is we want to build that request that's going to give us information here that we need in order to process a payment. And to do that, well, first of all, we're going to need to go back to our actual front-end app, and we're going to need to go to checkout service. Because in checkout service is where the core of our card token request happen. But now we're going to build something called a payment request, right? A pay request, we'll call it. And so that pay request is going to take in our token, the amount for which the pay request is going to happen, and a name. Those are the three pieces of information that the UI is going to supply us. And once the UI supplies us those, well, what we're going to do is we're going to return something. We're going to return a fetch call, right? A fetch. Where is that fetch going to go to though, Mo? Well, that's a good question. We're going to import the host from ... and then we're going to look at ... utils/env. And in env, we have our host. So let's fetch from, and let's build our URL from the host. And so we're going to go to host/pay. Now this host should be the same host that we used in the Google integration. And again, if you're not hosting these Firebase functions, again, you should. You should host these Firebase functions. On the local development, we're going to localhost 4000. On the Firebase, where we obviously have a URL. If you're implementing this solely on Android, you may get stuck here, again, without being able to host these on Firebase. So be very aware of that. So now that we're talking to the payment endpoint, the first thing we're going to do is we're not going to implement a mock here. We're not mocking anything with the payment endpoint. It's talking directly to Stripe. But what we're going to do is we're going to send a body, and that body is going to be json.stringify. And what we're going to send is the token, the name, the amount, and then last but not least, we're going to give this a method, and we're going to say post. Now, a post method is a way to talk to an endpoint. When you get something from an endpoint, the endpoint is giving you something. When you post something to an endpoint, you're sending something to an endpoint. So a post is very important in this case because we're sending information to the endpoint. That is the semantically correct way to do this. So then we'll do a .then and we'll say response. And so with that response, we'll say if rest.status is greater than 200, what we're going to do here is we're going to return promise.reject, and we're going to say something went wrong processing your payment. That is the generic error we're going to pass up. Now you could pass up the specific error. I'm choosing not to right here. And then we'll return res.json. Okay, so now we've handled talking to our endpoint, but we haven't really implemented it at all. So how do we go about actually integrating this into our component? Well, if we go to checkout.screen, here is where we're going to implement this. Now, you may be asking yourself, Mo, we've been using context to do this so far. We've been using our context to pass through the methods. Well, hold on, because checkout is holding state. The payment request is just doing a simple request to an endpoint. There is no intermediate state in which we can do the on payment. Now, you could, for instance, say that in the cart context, we could put an on payment method, but I prefer to do it this way. Right over here, what we're going to do is we're going to import pay request, and we're going to do that from ... services/checkout/checkout.service. And now that we have our payment request, now we can start building out the actual payment. So what we can say here, right over here, is that const on pay is equal to a function. Now that function is the function that's going to handle our payment. And what we're going to do with that payment is we're going to process it over here. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we don't really have our token right here, right? We don't have the information right here. But what we do have is our pay request. So our pay request can have our token, right? Our pay request needs some kind of token. It needs, so 123, right? Let's say that was our token. And then if we go over to the checkout service, we can see what else it needs. It needs a token, needs an amount, and it needs a name. Okay, so token, amount, let's say that that's $12.99, and then the name is Mo Beanie, right? And then what we'll do is we'll just fire off this request. We're not really going to do anything with it. And we'll say that, use effect on mount of this component, fire a pay request. Just very simple stuff. Let's fire that pay request, or rather on the on pay, which is wrapping the pay request. And so now we can go into our pay/index. And what we can do here is we can response.send request.body. And so when we do that, what we're going to see here, rather if we console.log request.body and we response.send success, what we're going to see here in our console log in the terminal is the following. If we go over here to our app and we reload, we should see a request coming in. So we executed a payment, we started a payment, we executed pay, we finished pay, but where's the console log? Where did any of that happen? Did none of that actually happen? Well, let's try it again. Places nearby. And if we go inside here, we do place order. Oh, here we go. Here's our token. So we're getting back the information here. Token 123, name Mo Beanie, amount 1299. Well, what if we do request.body.token? Can we get specifically the token? So let's go ahead and try that again. Let's reload here and let's do this and let's press order. Token is undefined. Why is token undefined? Well, let's try a JSON.parse around this. And then let's do JSON.parse request.body around the request.body, and let's try it again. So if we reload here and then we add to cart, we can see now, oh, the token's coming in, 123. So we need to parse the body. So we can say something along the lines of const body is equal to JSON parse body. And then we can say body.token, body.name. And so we're getting the body of the information that was sent to us. And if we again go ahead and reload here, what we can see in our checkout flow, if we add to cart, is 123 Mo Beanie. Okay, so we've now successfully entered the phase of talking to our server and sending the information. So now what do we do? Well, let's go hook up the actual information in. Now you may have asked yourself, Mo, why when I'm over here and I do this, does this happen? Well, that's because the browser, when you surf to this URL now, does a GET request. That GET request does not send a payload with it. It does not, in fact, allow the server a body, right? No body is being sent with this request. So these two lines already fail, right? This doesn't exist. Now, here's where you get into semantic reasoning. This URL should never be used to surf directly to. So we don't really care whether or not you surf to it. But in the case, like you could make a case where for security purposes or whatnot, you exit out if a GET request is being done or whatnot. In this particular scenario, we're not really concerned with that. So we're just going to leave it as is. And now that we have the body token name and the body amount, right? So we know everything about the request. Well, now we need to do a bit more hooking up, right? And what I mean by that is we need to take the actual data that we have in the UI here and utilize it. So the first thing we're going to pass in here is the sum. That's the first piece of data that we already know about. The second piece of data is the name. The name is something that we know now because it's being used in the state. And the third piece of data that we need is the const, the card that was added. So set card. And for this, we don't really have anything yet. We haven't really hooked up our card to be available. So if we do not have a card, or the card does not have an ID, because that is the token, card.id, when we add the card. If we don't have either of those, we're going to say return. Exit out of this function. We're going to say console.log something error, right? Or some error. So we're going to handle this error case a bit later on. And in order for us to do that, now we need to get this card. So how are we going to set the card? Well, first of all, everything happens in a flow. So first we fill in the name and then we fill in the card. And on the card, credit card input, we need to add an onSuccess hook. And that onSuccess hook is what's going to give us our card back. It's a function that's going to be invoked that's going to return us our card. And then we're going to say set card. And that is exactly what is going to allow us to get the card back from the credit card input. Now we could also simplify this and just say set card. Okay, so that way if we call it, it just automatically sets them. Now if we go to credit card input, right, the credit card input component, over here, we need to check. If you are incomplete, we're not going to do anything with you. But if you are complete, we're going to call. If it is incomplete, right? We have all of the information. We've already structured a very nice card over here and we get the info back. So if you are not incomplete, we're going to do the card request. And then when the info comes back, we're going to do onSuccess of the info. And onSuccess is going to be pulled from over here. onSuccess. And so by doing this, now we've hooked up the info that comes back from the card token to be pushed into onSuccess. And then that goes into the checkout screen. That's going to be calling set card. That's going to be going into this function. But now the onPay actually needs to be triggered at a certain point because on mount of our component doesn't really make sense. That's not going to allow us time to fill in things. So we're going to hook up our payment button to the onPay function. And that's going to allow us to implement this flow properly. Okay, so now if we fill in Mo Beanie, and then if we fill in 42, 42, 42, 42, 42, 42, 42, and so forth, and then we press pay, what's going to happen? Well, it's called pay, right? But it's still sending 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's not good. We actually didn't give it the card. So let's go ahead and give it the card .id. And that's going to be our payment token. So if we do that now, and then we press pay, there we go. Now we're getting a token Mo Beanie. But for some reason, the sum is not being sent. Why isn't the sum being sent? That's very odd. Well, obviously it is being sent in pay / we're not actually recording it. So body.amount. And if we do that and then we hit pay, now we're getting $12.99. So we're getting all our information back now from our UI to go to our actual service. It's that easy. Now we're not handling any of the information that comes back to us. But now that we're sending information to the server, we can try to process a payment. So let's see what that looks like. The UI.